Hey everyone, I am Dr. LJ Rose, and this is a webinar for the Natural Wellness Academy, one that we have been anticipating for a long time. Fabian, I heard your story even before I met you from your beautiful lady, Julianne, who is our lead mentor for our comprehensive CBD cannabis coaching program. And even though she is in Canada, she mentors many people all over the world, and she's very beloved. And what I remember the most, Fabian, about the story is how resistant you were to cannabis and how that changed 180 degrees and how you have helped thousands of people. So I want to say thank you for appearing here.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
And I am now going to mute myself, and you are able to share your screen and do anything. And everybody, we will open up for questions after the presentation, and we would love to hear from you too.
So thank you, Dr. LJ Rose, for having me on, but also for having a platform where we can talk about these kind of things like PTSD, mental health, cannabis, psychedelics, etc. So I'll start the presentation, and at the end we can have a little Q&A. All right. Okay.
I don't think we click the sound. Then we had to click the sound.
Where?
All right, okay, click stop share.
Okay, one
Now
second.
start share screen. Okay, that is on.
Okay.
Click slideshow.
Anything I can help with on this end, or?
And can you see the PowerPoint? Oh.
I can see it says Veterans for Healing trailer video.
No. Okay, we're wrong.
All right, so you can just stop share and then click on whatever it is that you're.
Yes.
And don't forget when you go to the share to mark share sound, because you're going to play us a video in a little bit too.
Yeah. Okay. It's right here.
Slideshow at the top.
Here we go.
Can you see the screen, LJ?
No, I'm not seeing the screen.
Okay, go back to Zoom. Okay, maybe X out of this.
I'm just going to pause the recording too, so that you know that when you're playing it back to people as well.
No.
Yes. How about now? You see that?
Yes, I see it says PTSD, trauma is trauma.
Perfect.
Okay, good. All right, we're doing it now.
Okay, we're good. Okay, here we go. Thanks for taking an hour out of your life tonight to listen to me talk. But PTSD, veteran culture, medical cannabis, and psychedelics are pretty near and dear to my heart. A little introduction. I was born and raised in a small coal mining town in Cape Breton Island. I thought I was going to play hockey pretty much my whole life. had that kind of dream. I did play till I was about 18, 19, and then I joined the military, 20 years old. University, gave it a crack, wasn't for me. Work boots and a hard hat, that was for me. So I joined the combat engineer trade. They said, do you like camping? And I said, yes. And they said, oh, you're good at hockey? This is for you. Perfect. 6 tours later, twice to Haiti, twice to Afghanistan. I found myself in Africa at age 21, seeing people that couldn't turn on and off water, didn't even have water, didn't have electricity, to Afghanistan's full-on combat. Been diagnosed with severe PTSD and alcohol dependency when I got back from Afghanistan after my 5th tour in 2007. And subsequently, the regime is to prescribe USSRIs and benzos, which really messed up my life as a young man. I was medically released from the Canadian Armed Forces. That's what CAF means there, in November 2012. Not by choice. Thought I was going to be a career soldier, and it's pretty devastating when you buy in so hard to a program. You're willing to die for the program, and then they just chew you up and spit you out. So, January 2011 for me, getting out of an inpatient program for addictions to alcohol and trauma safety. I had some clarity, first time in years, and gave the old plant medicine a go. It was almost like a weird feeling when I smoked so much cannabis. The first time I put it to my lips, I puked, but yet had the best feeling of my life. Puking, best feeling of my life. What's going on? I didn't know what's going on. So I'm like, I need to know why and how I'm feeling normal right now. And I haven't felt like that in years. I founded a company in the early days of cannabis in Canada, 2014 and 13, called Marijuana for Trauma. I found a doctor and then a few more, and was willing to help our group, help treat our patient base. It was a new program in Canada with the federally regulated cannabis market, and medical patients could get access to all kinds of varieties of cannabis medicine. So that was kind of exciting and new. Education wasn't there. It was just people were just growing marijuana and shipping it out the door. And one of our key focuses was getting our VA in Canada to pay for our medicine. So that was like an absolute breakthrough in 2014. I designed the first with 5 sheets of loose leaf, because I'm not a tech guy, as you just seen there, but I wrote it all out and drew it all out in 5 sheets of loose leaf and handed it to the tech people, and created the first cannabis patient manager system in Canada that's still being used by a group called Canada House Wellness Group. And also in the early days, the only issue was access, because there was none for us as well. There was no clinics and doctors willing to step up to the plate. So there wasn't 4 pillars, there was 1 pillar. You need to get off the pills and get on to marijuana, and here's your access. So that's what that was about. And since then, over the last 8 or 9 years, we've developed a 4-pillar roadmap to healing trauma, and it's evidence-based. So I was 27 years old, 7 years in the military, 5th tour. I went to Afghanistan with 0 days of training because I got poached at a last minute just because I was good at my job. So I could just go back. A 27-year-old soldier, there's no training to prepare for what happens when people blow up. That they can't really train you for that, and that's what that mark is. That's a suicide bomber who killed 13 people, and we're trying to figure out what to do next. So that's the reality of, going to war. Better make sure what we're doing. Good question. If I asked everybody on here, what would your answer be without, seeing anything? What is PTSD? Some call it PTS. They don't want to be called a disorder. Let's just say, what's trauma? You know, it's a date, time, stamped event that's burned into this brain that you can't get out of. We have multiple neural pathways, but with trauma, you only follow one neural pathway over and over again. And it's a destructive behavior that follows. You know, we say trauma is trauma with a capital T for a reason, because the rape victim or the assault victim or the abuse or the witnessing or the war, it does not matter. It's what the brain perceives as trauma, and you can't get past that. And after so many days, like 30 days, you can be diagnosed with PTS or PTSD. It's a little bit deeper than depression and anxiety. So yeah, it's funny, you know, not funny, but the synchronicity of this PowerPoint and this presentation at 15 years ago yesterday, Fabian was on one knee at 9:30 at night, landing a Black Hawk helicopter to pick up 2 dead Canadian soldiers because he made mistakes. And it's a hard pill to swallow, but you know, it's about expanding your toolbox so that you can reach in there every time you need something to deal with these issues. You know, I was showing signs of PTSD. It's hard to witness yourself in trauma because you're disassociating, or you're introverting, or you're isolating, or you're you know, doing some bad stuff. And with the drinking and the medication, you make bad decisions. That's about all you can do there. With receptor deficiency in the endocannabinoid system, okay, here's something great. Those 2 last slides. There's no pill specifically designed to treat trauma, and there's receptor deficiency in the brain for trauma: anandamide, 2-AG, and CB1. And you know, how can we all have to be prescribed pharmaceuticals first before we can be approved for plant medicine? But why is it like that if there is no pill that can pass the blood-brain barrier to level out the anandamide receptor, which is the happy receptor in the brain? You have trauma and you use the right precision cannabis, THC specifically, and it has to be smoked or vaped or heated up to a certain temperature so it will pass the blood-brain barrier and level out the anandamide receptor. So important. The anandamide, and ananda, it's a Sanskrit word which means bliss and delight. And if you have trauma, you probably have a drop in your bliss and delight quite often. And that's why when we smoke cannabis, we say we feel normal. Okay, so there's a bit of science behind it. I'm going to play a little 2-minute clip. Hopefully you can see it. This is some of the reality of this stuff we go through.
So much that people died or whose fault it is, it doesn't really matter, but there's not a whole lot of understanding or help when you get back, and that's where we're trying to create something.
Fabian, we can hear it, but we can't see it.
Options other than.
Okay. Why is that now? Okay.
It's not a one, maybe it's not starting to play.
Should work. We did that test before. It worked fine before we started.
And joining.
Maybe stop the share and then just go back in with just the video. You can do that. Maybe that's a good idea.
Yeah, let me see if I can do that.
My meetings, is anything coming up? Click this on the bottom. Back to your PowerPoint, maybe.
To share the full desktop. Yeah, I know. Lately I've been having trouble with sharing screens too. All right, Fabian, just like stop the share, where it says stop share. And then do it again, with share the screen, and then you can just share it right from the YouTube. If that's up on your.
No, I did something there. You're not seeing that now, eh?
You can see your desktop.
Can you see that?
Yeah.
Yeah. And we see
Okay.
the beginning of your PowerPoint again.
Yeah, just gonna skip ahead to.
We'll try it at the end again or something.
Because when it opened before, it did open as a YouTube video. So I'm just wondering if you can.
I'll skip by
access
it. I'll skip by it for now, and I'll go back to it at the end and see if we can get it.
Cool.
Okay, let me go back. Okay, so getting into, you probably can't see these slides too well, but I can send anybody this afterward in an email. The 4 pillars of healing were designed over 17 funerals, 8 years, 12 clinics, 12,000 patients, some devastation, and some lessons learned. Now, cannabis is very important, but it's only one tool, and it's only treating symptoms of trauma. It's not a cure for trauma. And I know Martha's interested in the pain side, and we'll get into that, but specifically for PTSD, you need to get educated, like Dr. LJ is saying. You need to talk to somebody about what might work for you in cannabis. You need to see a doctor and have a prescription for medical cannabis. And then you really need to explore what your cannabis coach said may or may not work for you, because we're all a little bit different. Now, generally speaking, indica dominant strains, high myrcene, limonene, and pinene strains, even more specific, terpenes, have been a draw by the trauma crowd, the severe trauma crowd, because smoking high myrcene, the sedative part of the cannabis, and the indica basically makes you forget. I don't want to say it makes you like dumb, but it makes you forget about what you were just angry about from the prefrontal cortex part of the brain, the fear-based part of the brain. And I tell a lot of spouses to tell their husband, if he's really getting at you, say, go to the shed, smoke pink kush, and tell him to come back. And in 5 minutes, he's not really going to know what he was even arguing with you about. And you need that break with trauma, because that's not the cure. The real root goes on to pillar 2. Now, a patient and an individual needs to be triaged. They don't just need cannabis. They need cannabis, they need therapy, they might need pain specialists and physio and all kinds of other medical professionals. But we have to start with the best Band-Aid, and that's cannabis, medical cannabis for PTSD. And then we take a treatment plan from these professionals, and we navigate for our patient through the Veteran Affairs system, which is very complex, through how to use cannabis, which takes a year or 2 to figure it out, to help your spouse understand it, to help engage in your community. Everyone's telling you you stink, and you're telling them, no, that's the terpene of my medication, just like many other terpenes that someone might enjoy. Fir balsam, it's a terpene I put in my beard. Like, if I had a cannabis terpene, I'd jam it all over my beard and be happy. But that's important to know, is the right medicine, pillar 1, and treating the root cause, pillar 2, which is a trusted therapist. And you treat inward, not trauma comes out of our mouths and we point this way, but it's all reflective of what's going on inside. And I'm 10 straight years every 30 days in therapy, and I love it. I get my homework, I go practice my life, I make mistakes, I go back, get some new homework, do it again until you figure it out. Pillar 3 is quite important, but you don't get to show up in pillar 3 just by giving us a call. You actually have to do some work. You have to want to be on the right medicine. You have to want to have a therapist and do that work too. And then pillar 3 is like, we call it land-based healing, but it's aftercare with your peers. It's songwriting camps with your peers. It's hiking, horses, swimming, fishing, whatever is feeling good. Bingo. It doesn't really matter. As long as, you're with your tribe, you're feeling good, you're using your medicine and you're learning. So that's what we do in Pillar 3. Now, we're fortunate and unique enough that we've set up something cool in Canada where we have a charity, a federal charity, and we have a group of nonprofit networks. The nonprofit networks are veterans that are building retreats and aftercare programs. And the charity is attached to them because people don't want to give you any money unless you can give them a charitable receipt. So for tax time. So we have that ability in Canada to host retreats, raise funds through our charity, and actually get some work done and track this data. We do interview before you show up, post activity after you leave, and see what's really working, because at the end of the day, none of us really know. We're just taking a crack at what we think might work here. I'm going to move on. That's the 4 pillars. Sorry, pillar 4, fairly important too, but it's basically an individual moving out onto their own, turning trauma into an accelerant to growth. At this point, they want to open their own companies and they want to open their own nonprofits, and we give them the resources to help support them. How do you open a numbered company and a bank account and consider taxes, and how does money flow in and out, and how do you get this stuff done? We have some detailed SOPs and paperwork that they can follow. And that's pillar 4. So we want to witness, capture, and support success. And then a little sip of water for a second. I won't read all these ones on medical cannabis truth, but what I will say is that I was lied to my whole life about medical cannabis, and you don't know what you don't know. That's all I can say. Is my sister needed it. I would never smoke it. I'm in the military, charged the people smoking in the military. That was the attitude until, like I said, I got out of treatment, had some clarity. I shared a driveway with another neighbor who had a 18-year-old who said, "Here, man, you got to do this. You're right out to lunch." And I did until I puked, and then I found my way. What the cannabis happens to do, if you can imagine the pharmaceuticals being a helmet where you can't communicate, you take that helmet off, you use cannabis, and it opens your heart and your communication. And you can now receive from your therapist what the hell they're saying versus feeling like a zombie and I'm not absorbing the therapy anymore. So that was a big eye opener for me. Plants Not Pills was basically a slogan that we launched Marijuana for Trauma with, and on the back of our shirts, that was our tagline, so to speak, because we're tired of taking a handful of pharmaceuticals. Like in the troops in the States, they're being crippled. 6,000 a year are committing suicide, and I can guarantee you that there's a part to play with the pharmaceuticals in that. The suicidal ideation, I almost, anyways, it's a part to play, but once you get on the plant medicine and figure it out, you won't turn back. Okay, so this is supposed to be a funny slide. You look at the chicken and he's fried there, but it's my intention is to educate on the importance of the entourage effect for trauma. Is this chicken impaired? Yeah, he looks pretty impaired right there. But when you use cannabis on a daily basis, every hour to 2 hours on the hour, the impairment goes away after a couple of weeks. I'm not impaired at all. I stand upside down on my head with a joint in my mouth. I'm not impaired. I'm impaired when I don't have the medicine in my body. So the entourage effect is, many will tell you to vaporize in the medical community because it's the healthier way to deliver the medicine, but you're losing parts of the plant as it heats up your medicine for you to then take it. So the entourage effect is like, you can imagine lighting the end of that joint, you're getting all of the profile of the plant at one time, right down the joint, right into your body, and that's creating the entourage effect. it's important to understand. Medical cannabis therapy, one slide ahead there, is important. We're talking about cannabis coaches here. You better understand THC and how it treats ailments, and not just THC, CBD, there's other cannabinoids, there's over 100. But specifically, THC dominates the female plant by 42%. So you should really know how that works for people and all its delivery forms. You know, you can give somebody that has anxiety THC thinking it's going to help them, but if you gave them sativa, you're actually going to put them in a spin. You know, when they need CBD for anxiety, and maybe a little bit of THC, like a 4-to-1 ratio kind of strain. So this is important. And then knowing what is passing the blood-brain barrier. People are taking THC and they're eating it for trauma, and that's not working. It doesn't pass the blood-brain barrier. Yes, your body will relax, but your brain will not. And your receptor deficiency will not be replaced by orally ingesting cannabis. Another important note. We all have an endocannabinoid system, and the deficient receptors for trauma, there's a spike in 2-AG and CB1, and there's a drop in anandamide, and it's measurable under what's called a positron emissions tomography scan, or a PET scan. And this literature is from NYU Langone Medical Center, Dr. Neumeister. You can have a grab at that. Okay, and is there a difference between medical and recreational? Yeah, I mean, we're using it for fun, but it's always medicine first. And what's sad, or what I see here on the East Coast of Nova Scotia, is that there's old people going to the liquor store. The liquor store is co-locating the recreational cannabis inside the liquor store. And there's old people going in there to buy CBD, not for recreation and not for fun, for pain relief. And it's in, so, you know, even though we're progressive in Canada, we still got a few things to sort out. Precision cannabis, okay, and that's an important thing. There's hundreds and thousands of strains. You got to know what strains work for what conditions if you're going to be talking about medical patients. For trauma, it's a variety of Kush or high myrcene and high indica strains. I can name a few, but high indica, high myrcene. I think I pushed one too far. Marijuana for trauma, I'm not going to talk too much about that. It was just a pioneering time in space, 2014 to 2017, where the VA was paying for medical cannabis. There's a few doctors on board, and the floodgates opened. So you can imagine a lot of mistakes were made. A lot of education came from that. And the industry is getting better every day. And if you're into cannabis and entheogenic therapy, and theogens are just medicine that activates other states of consciousness, then you're probably into spirituality. And I didn't know what that was. You know, born and raised a Catholic in Cape Breton, and going to church on Sunday and first communion and confirmation. I didn't know what spirituality even meant. So I asked when I was in treatment to bring someone in. They explained it, and then I get out. And I bought my first book called The Four Agreements, and I followed that like it was my Bible. The Toltec wisdom is the artist of the spirit. What else? Oh yeah, it was a lot of fun. Really, I tapped into my spirituality the first 2 years of starting cannabis, before calling it, like getting it from a clinic and getting it off the street. I was a bit of a hippie, wearing tie-dye, going to festivals, connecting with music, not wearing shoes all summer, and not connecting with everything, and very foreign territory for me. I need to have a plan, I need to practice the plan and then execute the plan usually, versus, all right, let's just dance or whatever. So that was a lot of fun, exploring spirituality, and I still do. I practice yoga daily. This is what keeps me youthful. When me and Julianne, my partner, roll around, we were just in between hockey games at my son's provincials, and we found a cool spot. we do headstands. And if you look at the world upside down, it's a lot funnier than right side up. Okay, one more sip of water before we get into psychedelics. This is one of my favorite topics, is talking about non-ordinary states of consciousness, because this is where we get a little deeper. Dr. Stanislav Grof is an older gentleman who's been pioneering non-ordinary states of consciousness. You know, we'd love to be able to get there through breath work, and we'd love to be able to regulate our body through just breath work, but that would be what we consider a guru or someone who's got a very diligent practice. The medicine can help you get there, like psilocybin. If you understand the dosing of it, from the milligrams from 25 up to flood dosing at 1,000 to heroic dosing at 5,000 to minimal effective dosing at 150, where we're seeing tons of results in milligrams, and about the 300 milligram being close to where you need someone babysitting, what they call a sitter, where you're going to peer off into a non-ordinary state of consciousness. I listen to a lot of Ram Dass on audiobooks at night, and his guru that he honored daily. Ram Dass is who I honor daily, but his guru would tell Ram, when he would be like, "Oh, Maharaji, there's so much suffering in the world. What are we going to do? And we got to save the kids and all the people." That it was Ram Dass that was not in balance, and everything else is as it's supposed to be. And if you're not in balance, then it's going to feel a bit turbulent for you at times in what we deal with. So, when you get close to the line with death, and then it doesn't phase you anymore, you don't care about it anymore, like it doesn't bother you one bit, then you're willing to go and seek for answers, and trauma's pushing you there to go get those answers. Then I traveled to Mexico with a group of doctors, and I've done ibogaine, and I've tried 5-MeO DMT and ayahuasca and psilocybin and cannabis, and they all use a framework called set, setting, dose, and skill. And I've learned a few things there. What happens is, the set and setting and the facilitator is probably the most important. I mean, the dose and skill is nice because the doctor's got to give you a good source of medicine and check for sensitivity. But if the setting ain't right, then the medicine's not going to be happy. Your relationship with the medicine might not be a good experience. So, when we practice with this medicine, it's always about low and slow. When we talk, for me, I'm mostly only going to talk about psilocybin. It's a one molecule fungus. We all started from mycelium, and it's an easy one that's going to progress to treat depression across the globe, in my opinion. So microdosing is a word that people use that I'd be careful with, versus a minimal effective dose. It's not quite a microdose, it's a little bit more than that. And then like a flood dosing and heroic dosing takes a little bit of skill and ceremony. If you're looking for treatment, look on the other side of this, and we can all get together by the fire and use some of the medicine as well, and laugh and have a quite funny experience. But we're dealing with it as medicine. We have a license from Health Canada to grow and sell psilocybin with a new relationship that we'll get into another time. But let's just say Veterans for Healing Global has a license to grow and sell psilocybin, grow and sell cannabis, register patients, and offer the 4-pillar services that we have that we think might help. This is it. We're focusing on precision craft cannabis, terpene selection, psilocybin access, and total health approach. using our 4-pillar roadmap. That's in a nutshell where we're headed. Okay, so we have hundreds and hundreds of patients that have been thousands of patients that have had success starting at this point at the cannabis pillar 1 part, but a lot of these people have now are moving through their trauma on their way up. And that's the end of the information I have for tonight. This last picture with the dosing levels is I think LJ might know, seen that one before, but it gives you a basic idea of where microdose 50 milligrams, therapeutic dose 150, macro dose 300, flood dose a gram, and heroic dose 5 grams, basically as you go up that chart. And when you have a relationship with the medicine and practice with it and use it often, you really got to be careful, because with the mushroom, often I've taken some and I've taken too much, and I'm at that because it goes really fast in the beginning and you're right on a rocket ship without a seatbelt, and then it slowly, gradually comes down the other end. But it's that first while that you're like, oh my God, I think I took too much, and you can't get it out once it's in. So that's why it's a low and slow rule of thumb with the psychedelics. Yeah, I think that's
I did want to mention, Fabian, thank you. Yes, I did recognize that because I do the instructional design, but you are also taking our Sacred Journey Facilitator course, which is about learning to work with the earth medicines and to be present and to figure out the dosing. You're taking that with Lindsay Webb. And then later this year, we're starting an intuitive microdosing course as well. And you're going to be a contributor on that since you've created this line. And it's not just going to be about cannabis or the psychedelics. It will also include herb lore, herbology that can be taken in microdoses. So just wanted to, I know that you're getting close to finishing your Sacred Journey Facilitator.
Well, the one of the coolest things I've learned in that Sacred Medicine Facilitator course was a place that's, so down here on this level, we're in 3D and we have complex trauma and complex issues. Now, when you take the medicine at the flood dose level, you go out of your physical body and transform. You go beyond your form into the 5th dimension, let's say. Now I'm out in this space where I like to be. I can take my good transpersonal energy and put it onto that 3D complex issue, lusting, trauma, whatever it is, and apply the two together. And the place where they come together is called cispersonal space. That's a place where work can get done. And I didn't know what the terminology was until I did this course, but I've been up there many times doing work.
It's fascinating. So far, Lindsay hasn't been able to find a small enough dose for me, a subperceptive dose. I'm way too sensitive to it, but I was so curious. And my background, I started the Academy back in 2013 with the holistic health and life coaching because I had healed myself of an autoimmune disorder, and I was understanding that health coaching was a thing, but that nobody was really looking at the mental side of habits, and my background is as a specialist in the subconscious mind. And I would love to work with your organization to come up with therapies for trauma, because that's kind of really what put me on the map, is that I had developed an alternative mental health system to help adults heal from childhood trauma. So I would love to take these ideas and see if we can, kind of repurpose them for your organization, because you're absolutely right that I think that there is some work being done with the psychedelics that can actually heal trauma. In cannabis, you used a word, which is an interesting word. You said Band-Aid. And I'm glad that you said that, because I think in PTSD, it's helping you feel better, but you do need those other pillars in order to get to the core. And the work that I've done internationally has been around hypnotherapy, which is a very fast way. So we'll really need to have that conversation.
For sure.
what I'm thinking you could do, if you want to stop the share and then try to go in again, I think we'd love to see that video. You can click that direct and make sure to share the sound on it.
Share
Mhm.
this. Yeah. Okay.
Click share screen again.
Share screen again.
And then where's your YouTube? Click that.
This.
Mhm.
Back in the,
No. Open up this. And I'll go back to that.
this.
If by any chance we're not able to see it, I can include that link because I'll be giving you the YouTube. It's going to be unlisted on YouTube. Or actually, maybe we could, if you want, we could make this one a public one, and I can list that as a referral too, and give your email so that if anybody wants your slides too, we'll include your slides in the
There.
webinar library on this.
You see that?
Yes, I can see it. And I can hear it.
Time so much that people died or whose fault it is, it doesn't really matter, but there's not a whole lot of understanding or help when you get back. And that's where we're trying to create something that gives guys options other than joining their peers on the other side of the dirt. So the legalities around cannabis north of the American border are quite different than in the States, and I have a heavy heart and a sad place in my heart for my southern brothers and sisters.
Not kind of typical therapy meeting as you would think, but just a gathering just like this, a little bit of food, boys all get together and girls, and we just relax and hang out and be there for one another, right?
Not that it was any less before, but I just get it a lot more because you see what my son went through, like the PTSD and losing everything, starting over, and then coming down here seeing all of these guys. Everybody's pretty well in the same boat. They all went through some pretty traumatic stuff, but they're here and they're happy. And they're such awesome friggin' men, awesome people.
YouTube.
Where?
No.
That was very moving. So that's part of the movie. This is like the
And I would argue.
Oops. There we go. Back.
so that's a preview to a movie that you produced on this subject.
Yeah, it's a guy in Washington did one called Unprescribed, Steve Elmore, and yeah, it is on Amazon. But it's about the Americans not getting access to cannabis. And we brought him up. We did a video on showing what it's like for veterans to have access, because you don't see them getting together like that. You don't see that opportunity because some of them will lose their pension. Some of them be in big shit if they use cannabis in the States. And that's unfortunate considering the suicide rate. With all the education we know, with what you just heard, with the receptors, with the brain waves, with the treatment needed, we know it's not just about cannabis. Like, no one can say that. But we can say there isn't a pill specifically designed for trauma. So what the hell are we doing? We're hurting people.
It does seem to stop that feedback loop that the neurotransmitters and that neural pathway, and give some relief. Again, I do very much agree that the trauma does need to be addressed and treated, but what a wonderful way, rather than kind of taking somebody's motivation away through a lot of pharmaceuticals that aren't mixing well and that are going to be messing your liver up too over the long haul.
Not only your liver, you got to consider, as a young man, I was 31 years old when my sexual functions didn't work for 2 years of my life, and the VA
Wow.
gave me $60,000 and said, sorry about that.
Wow.
Yeah, so that makes marriages break up because guys isolate and don't want to say anything, but I don't care. I'm telling you, it didn't work for 2 years and I was 31. And I went and seen a specialist and he said, stop taking the pills, man. You're on the heaviest dose of SSRIs they can give you and it will work again. And she can tell you, we're doing okay. It gets back on track, and the pink kush really helps. But
Well,
just saying,
great.
it's a real thing that happens. So,
Yeah.
and women have the same issue too.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Well, are you ready to open up for questions? If anybody has any questions, if you could unmute your mic, ask your question. You might have a discussion and then mute up again just because the noise comes in, but feel free. If you've got a question, just unmute and ask. Don't be shy. We'd love to have some questions done here on the recording. And then of course we'll stop the recording for those of you who are shy. We understand.
Hello.
Hey, Allie.
Yeah. Well, first off, thank you so much for your service. And I remember hearing about you in 2015 when I was living in Edmonton, and my heart is just pounding, it was like home, Nova Scotia, and all this was going on. So I'm very, very proud of what you guys do. I have a couple questions, but I'll just do one for the recording here. What is your experience working with vets that had to burn down cannabis, then come back to this being their medicine? What's that transition period for them? Because that would be hard.
Very hard. I was a little bit naive. Thanks. Good question, Ali. I was a little naive to the Canadian Armed Forces. There's a few people who were using cannabis and knew about what I didn't know, that it was medicine. Now, I stood by and watched it burn in Afghanistan, and I didn't give a shit at that time. Burn it all down. Someone tried to give me a big block of hash. I'm like, I got my weapon up. So I didn't know what its value was. And now that I do, it would bring tears to my eye. I couldn't do that. I couldn't stand by and watch that female plant who can give so much back to us. If you love her and respect her appropriately, she'll deliver every time. But if you abuse her, she'll deliver too, and she'll hand you your ass. It's called taking a dab for your first time and you do too much. Look out. So good question. And it's a general consensus for those who come back and get on the medicine, but there's a whole bunch who come back and I still haven't even gave it an attempt yet. So that's where it's at.
Did you want to save another question for when we're off the recording, Ellie?
Yeah, can I ask one more?
Oh,
right
sure.
now?
Go ahead.
Yeah, okay. So where PTSD is treated better through the blood-brain barrier, so inhalation, have you worked with any vets that didn't enjoy actually toking? So getting it, the onset delivery, what would you recommend a delivery method for people who didn't really enjoy that method?
Right. So we have to pass the blood-brain barrier to replace just the receptors to treat symptoms of trauma. Now, no one wants to smoke. It depends on the severity of your trauma, I suppose, or what kind of situation you're in. Vaping's is optimal, and maybe the little I got myself a little shatterizer, and you can just take a little bit that way. But ultimately, a sublingual or a spray or something that will pass the blood-brain barrier is what I hope is developed and pushed out further. And then you only smoke when you need to, when serious situations arrive, or when you require that entourage effect, versus I'm smoking 15 joints a day that are about 0.8 of a gram. And I need it because I'm out and about, I'm busy, and I don't know, I'm getting triggered out there, but I'm dodging bullets and having a shot and getting back in there. It's kind of how you got to do it. And then when you do fuck up, you got to own it. Trauma's no excuse. And then you got to go to your therapist and say, give me more homework.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Good question.
Hey there. If I can. I'll try. My name's Lizzie. Fabian, I'm so grateful to you for everything that you do and your experience that you shared. I've been really looking forward to this for a long time. My best friend that I grew up with was a Marine. I'll try not to get emotional, but
It's okay.
he didn't make it. He made it home, but he left his spirit
Isn't
there.
that sad? Yeah.
And when he died and we looked at all the medications on his dresser, there were just dozens of them. And sometimes they repeated with different doctors. And all they told him the whole time is just don't smoke weed no matter what you do. So he didn't, and he died from a heroin overdose.
Yeah.
I credit prohibition. That's what, so what you do.
It breaks my heart too, Lizzie, and we will remember your friend, and we'll remember all the guys and gals that didn't make it, and it's unfortunate. But I think with our collective consciousness and these kind of platforms, if we can keep spreading this message to everybody we know and educate them, then that plant will get through to our friends and families, and we'll do our best. But your friend had to make a sacrifice as well, and we'll see him in Valhalla.
And I would like to mention that Lizzie is one of our cherished mentors for the cannabis program, also went through the cannabis program like Julianne did, and is doing just a great job with mentoring. I do have a question from Zoya. She said, would you say that medicinal cannabis would help with complicated PTSD and childhood trauma?
Would medical cannabis help with child PTSD?
With complicated PTSD and childhood trauma.
Yeah, so again, I'll start with a capital T. Trauma's trauma. On the child front, they have the same brain. We don't want to mess with their brain when they're young or nothing like this, but trauma.
Adult childhood PTSD.
Oh, and yeah, did you say an adult has childhood PTSD? Did I get that wrong?
Well, she said that would it help, with complicated PTSD and childhood trauma? And I mean, as a specialist, Zoya, in childhood trauma and helping adults, you do need to have the deeper therapy. But certainly, I think it's the same type of thing. I mean, I had childhood trauma.
Yes.
And when I'm a baby boomer, so I discovered there was no, I didn't have the same kind of prohibition on pot that you did, being from the generations that, Nancy Reagan, started her Just Say No and the war on drugs. And I would say that it has helped me, and it has opened me to be able to find, because there is something called hyperpriming that happens when you know how to utilize. This is why coaches and educators and consultants are so important, because you have an ability to tap more deeply. And even in our program, we cover not just the body effects, but the mind and the spiritual aspects too. Even to the point of, what do you do when you get the munchies? I mean, there's a lot of different areas that we cover, to that. So yes, Zoya, I would say that it would be a good start, but you do want to make sure that you're getting your treatment too. Janice asks, she's a medical doctor who's just ready to finish her certification, and she practices in St. Louis, Missouri. She says, so edibles or tinctures do not cross the blood-brain barrier, but sublingual does? That's her question.
Right. I think there's one company, Hexo maybe, or there might be two, that have a sublingual. What I would say is I would like to see a study done with a positron emissions tomography scan, taking blood before people use cannabis, measuring their brain, getting them to use cannabis. If a sublingual works, great. I'm saying that we want to get from not smoking every day to finding something to pass the blood-brain barrier. Now we got lots of room for research and evolving here. And that's what I would say about that.
Well, and they keep, they keep producing new kinds of products. So I have no doubt that they will find a non-inhalation way. Martha, I'm so sorry what you've gone through. She said she was only 6 years old the first time that she wanted to end her life. We do. I mean, here in the United States, I mean, in Canada, it's no secret that we have a lot of crazy people here in the United States, a lot of angry people. We're having, you know, they can barely cover all of the mass shootings that we're having on a weekly basis because there is a mental health problem in this country.
And remember that the cannabis is, again, a Band-Aid. It's to treat the symptom of the trauma. It's not to treat the trauma. The treating the trauma is with your doctor of psychology, your feelings doctor. That's treating the root cause of your child. They're going to go back in your timeline from when you took a first breath or a first memory, and they're going to go through all that with you and do the work and give you homework. The cannabis is allowing you to show up and absorb what they're saying.
I'm putting cannabis as the Band-Aid that helps you cope, but
Yeah.
not the panacea. It's not going to handle everything. It's not a magic. There is definitely research that with trauma, even recovery, people who have addictions are achieving incredible results with the entheogen, the medicine that is the psychedelic medicines that is still being researched. And as I mentioned, it's not something that can legally be shipped to the United States, but for those of you in Canada, Fabian has produced a line of psilocybin.
Yeah, it's a beautiful medicine.
And yes,
Yeah.
Joanne said multidisciplinary approach is key to recovery. I have been hearing great things about EMDR. I mean, again, my specialization has been using hypnotic regression to help people with trauma. We do have even a course on clinical hypnotherapy at the Academy. However, I've been hearing great things about EMDR, and there are other modalities out there.
Eye movement desensitization reprocessing therapy is a good one. Cognitive behavior therapy. So what you're doing is leveling receptors with cannabis, but then you got to think of the alpha, theta, beta brain waves. The left and right brain is in dysregulation, and there's a thing called neurofeedback or biofeedback that helps regulate the brain waves. You know, so then you're getting the best out of the therapy. Your brain's kind of as normal as it can be to start the work on what's going on. For example, Martha, you got to really have a therapist. It's not the medicines to cure. It's doing the work with your trusted therapist.
You know, something that I wanted to mention, I think the reason people feel so much better when they're using cannabis is that most of us have an endocannabinoid deficiency syndrome. We're not getting enough of the endo, which are the body produced cannabinoids going on in our body, so that when we utilize the phytocannabinoids, it's kind of filling in the pieces of the puzzle that we're missing. And so people are really feeling better, so much better that maybe they think that they are all better. And then of course, trauma is going to raise its ugly head again. It does.
Well, hey, you feel good and go out and about in the city and you watch, you'll get handed yourself another lesson. And it's just a matter how far it goes. I get triggered. I have my own moments. I have them in the hockey rinks with the screaming adults at other screaming adults, and stuff happens, and just use your tools. No
well,
excuse.
you know, I'm hoping for us to get together because the work that I do really does need to be it can't be done through the computer like other hypnotherapy can. And I want to do that work with you too.
Yeah, that'd be great.
And see what I can. Are there any other questions on the recording? And then we'll pivot to having the recording off. So if anybody's shy and wants to ask, you just go ahead and unmic yourself if you do. All right, well.
A question. Okay, so would you say war is a 3D concept? So like when you're elevating yourself to a 5th dimension state, do you recall your PTSD? Like, do you remember war when you're in this elevation? Thank you.
So the war itself is 3D. The traumatic event is kind of euphoric, but to get to that place, the 5th dimension, I'm not a guru, so I need to take the medicine, and the medicine gets me there. And then, yes, I can think about, because I brought my intention before I used the medicine. I want to work on my trauma. I want to figure out what's going on. Please show me something. Like I'm open to receiving, and I'm putting my altar item on, and I'm going deep. And when you're up there, yes, now I'm going to apply my good energy, transpersonal energy, onto that situation that I'm having, and I'm stuck. And that's this personal space is where, yeah, in the 5th dimension, you can do work.
That's an excellent
sense?
question, Ally. You know, and
It
it
is a
does
great
because, and that's what cannabis can do for you too. It can just kind of open those doors of perception too. All right, so I'm going to thank you, Fabian.
Yes.
This was incredible. We're going to stay and speak a little bit after I turn the recording off. Excuse me, but for anybody who's interested, I think I've put it here, Natural Wellness Academy, we are.org. Look at all of our courses, send information. I am the academic director. All of the courses you are actually mentored, so you have that one-on-one relationship. We're going to be working with Veterans for Healing by training the crew, you know, in the various disciplines. And definitely, Fabian, we're going to get together and talk about what I would love to contribute to what you're doing with what I know about trauma. So
yeah, we got some connections in Florida. It's called Lutz Live to Tell, and Mama Lutz, she lost 2 Marines. Her sons, both sons, she lost to trauma that made it home. So
really,
and
well,
I
it's
brought
interesting.
their friend up, Josh Frey, 2 Purple Hearts, shot off shoulder and fallujah. I brought him up to our retreat, and he's anyways, we got work to do.
And their last name is Lutz, because we actually live
Lutz, yeah.
adjacent to a town called Lutz, which is
Janine
kind of
Lutz.
funny.
Look up
Okay.
Janine Lutz. Yeah.
Janine Lutz. Okay,
Yeah.
great. I'm going to stop the recording, everybody, but hang
Okay.
tight because we'll still go on speaking. Thank you, everybody, for attending.